Have you ever felt a strange, inexplicable chill run down your spine when interacting with someone, as if beneath their friendly smile, behind their well-rehearsed words, something deeply unsettling was hiding, something you couldn't see, but your instincts were screaming at you to notice? Carl Jung, one of the most insightful and visionary psychologists in human history, uncovered a deeply troubling psychological pattern during his decades of clinical work. He observed that there exists a silent warning, an invisible red flag that our conscious minds often overlook, but that our most primal instincts detect instantly. This warning doesn't come in the form of loud threats or openly hostile behavior. It doesn't arrive with yelling or confrontation. On the contrary, it's far more subtle, and precisely because of that, far more dangerous. It whispers rather than shouts. It hides in the shadows of politeness, charm, and false virtue. Long before Jung, ancient traditions and spiritual teachings warned of certain kinds of people, people whose presence felt off, whose behavior caused a quiet but unmistakable alarm in the soul. What our ancestors intuited, Jung was able to define with the language of science and psychology. And perhaps the most disturbing revelation is this. This silent signal of danger can come from people who seem completely normal, even charismatic. When you notice it, when you feel it in your bones, the only sane response is to step away, immediately. This warning, this invisible danger, revolves around a psychological mechanism Jung called the projection of the shadow. He considered it one of the most dangerous forces in human relationships. Picture this. You're having a conversation with someone, nothing unusual, perhaps even pleasant, and then, out of nowhere, they accuse you of having dark intentions, selfish motives, or negative traits you don't recognize in yourself at all. You're shocked, confused, you wonder where it's coming from. But here's the truth. They are not responding to you. They are responding to a distorted version of you that lives in their own mind, a version shaped by their unresolved internal conflicts. Sound familiar? That moment, that eerie disconnect between who you are and what they think you are, is what Jung referred to as shadow projection in its rawest form. The shadow represents all the aspects of ourselves that we reject, traits, impulses, fears, and memories that we consider unacceptable. Instead of confronting them, we bury them deep in the unconscious. But repression doesn't erase them. These shadow elements don't vanish. They simply gather strength below the surface, waiting to erupt. And when someone hasn't done the inner work to face and integrate their own shadow, they inevitably begin to see it in others, not as a choice, but as an unconscious compulsion. They become blind to those aspects in themselves and project them onto the people around them. And that's what makes it so dangerous. From their perspective, you truly are the enemy. You embody the very things they refuse to accept within themselves. And because this projection feels so real to them, they react with conviction, with a kind of certainty that is impervious to logic or evidence. Ancient spiritual traditions knew this long before Jung gave it a name. In Buddhism, there's the metaphor of the darkened mirror, where one's own inner impurities are reflected outward, appearing as if they belong to others. In Christian teachings, we find the image of someone obsessing over the speck in another's eye while ignoring the log in their own. The theme is universal. The human mind has a tendency to see in others what it cannot bear to see in itself. But what's even more disturbing is this. The person projecting their shadow truly believes their distorted view of you is real. They're not consciously lying or manipulating. They're trapped in a reality shaped by unresolved inner battles, and because of this conviction, they can be incredibly persuasive. Others, family, friends, co-workers, can begin to believe their version of you. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what Jung understood intuitively. Our brains are wired to confirm our existing beliefs. We don't see reality as it is. We see it through filters created by our past experiences, traumas, and internal narratives. But when someone is projecting a massive amount of unintegrated shadow material, these filters become complete distortions. Reality bends to fit their psychological needs. Author and Jungian analyst Robert Johnson once described this phenomenon as wearing glasses that distort everything you see, except you don't know you're wearing them. That's how projection works. Invisible to the one projecting, but painfully obvious to those on the receiving end. So how can you recognize when someone is projecting their shadow onto you? The red flag appears in that unsettling moment when there's a clear disconnect between what someone claims you are and your own internal reality. They accuse you of hidden motives you don't have, of feelings you've never felt, and they do it with total certainty, utterly immune to contradiction, unwilling to hear your truth. What's happening in that moment is profound. You've become the battleground for someone else's internal war. They are fighting a desperate battle against parts of themselves they cannot accept, and unknowingly, they've cast you as the enemy in their personal drama. But shadow projection is only part of the picture. Jung also identified another phenomenon, perhaps even more dangerous, called psychic inflation. You've probably heard the old saying, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Jung might have added, "and guided by those who believe themselves unquestionably good." Psychic inflation occurs when a person identifies so strongly with their sense of righteousness, moral superiority, or spiritual purity that they lose all humility. This is not just arrogance, it is something far more insidious. A person suffering from psychic inflation no longer sees themselves as an ordinary, fallible human being. Instead, they believe they are a chosen one, a savior, an enlightened guide, a mouthpiece for universal truth. Their ego has merged with powerful unconscious forces, what Jung called archetypes, and they begin to see themselves not as individuals, but as cosmic agents. They don't have opinions. They deliver truths. They don't make mistakes. They are beyond reproach. This phenomenon has been warned about for centuries. The German mystic Meister Eckhart spoke of it as the most subtle trap on the spiritual path, the point where the seeker mistakes themselves for the divine. In Zen Buddhism, it's referred to as the Zen sickness, a delusion born from spiritual pride. The Sufi mystics call it the veil of light, even more dangerous than the veil of darkness, because it's harder to see, harder to resist. The unmistakable sign of psychic inflation is this: the person never questions their own motivations. While every true spiritual master, from the Buddha to Jesus to Socrates, expressed humility and reverence for the mystery of existence, those inflated by ego exhibit the opposite. They are utterly certain. Their beliefs are absolute. Their way is the only way. And here's the twist. This state of being can generate incredible charisma. When someone speaks with unwavering certainty, with an air of divine authority, people listen. People follow. This is why inflated individuals often become leaders, influencers, even gurus. But beneath that shining confidence lies a dangerous illusion, the illusion of infallibility. Jung's message was not one of paranoia, but of awareness. He didn't tell us to fear others, but to recognize the patterns within ourselves and in those around us that lead to suffering and destruction. Projection of the shadow and psychic inflation are not just psychological concepts. They are forces that shape families, communities, and entire societies. The key is to know the signs, to trust that primal instinct when something feels off, to listen to your body when it recoils, even if your mind doesn't understand why, to walk away when someone's conviction feels oppressive, when their truth denies your reality. In the end, the path to true wisdom isn't found in claiming absolute truth. It's found in humility, in self-awareness, in the willingness to confront the darkness within, rather than cast it upon the world outside. Carl Jung observed something both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Individuals suffering from severe psychic inflation, a condition where the ego becomes fused with powerful unconscious archetypes, often draw around them groups of loyal, even fanatical followers. What makes this phenomenon so compelling is that these leaders radiate an aura of absolute conviction. They speak and act with unwavering certainty. And in a world riddled with ambiguity and existential doubt, that kind of assurance is magnetic. We, as human beings, have an innate hunger for meaning. We crave clarity in a universe that rarely offers it. When faced with complexity, chaos, and uncertainty, many of us instinctively gravitate toward those who seem to have it all figured out. Those who present themselves as beacons of truth, as vessels of higher knowledge, or as living embodiments of divine will. The sheer force of their confidence can feel like a safe harbor in a storm. But Jung warns us that this is precisely the danger. When someone believes, with no room for doubt, that their words and actions are aligned with something greater than themselves, be it God, destiny, or some transcendent cause, they begin to see themselves not just as a person, but as a necessary instrument of a cosmic plan. This fusion of self and archetype can be intoxicating, both for the individual and for their followers. The Chilean psychologist and spiritual teacher Claudio Naranjo, who spent years studying both psychology and the wisdom traditions of various cultures, made a striking observation about the nature of the ego. He proposed that there is a form of ego far more subtle and insidious than the typical egocentrism we are familiar with. The ordinary ego says, "I am important." It demands recognition, praise, and control. But the spiritual ego, Naranjo pointed out, is much harder to detect because it cloaks itself in the language of humility and service. It proclaims, "I am a channel for the highest good," or "I speak for divine truth." At first glance, this might sound noble, even admirable, but the danger lies in how such a belief places the person above reproach. If they truly believe they are a mouthpiece for some ultimate good, then any criticism of them becomes, by extension, a criticism of that good. They no longer see themselves as fallible human beings, but as sacred emissaries. This mindset makes them not only blind to their own flaws, but also dangerously resistant to feedback or correction. And for those who follow them, it creates a dangerous paradox. To question the leader is to question truth itself. So how can we recognize when someone is suffering from psychic inflation? There's a revealing clue in how they handle opposition. If a person reacts with defensiveness, outrage, or self-righteousness when they are questioned, especially on matters of belief, purpose, or identity, it may be a sign that they've begun to merge their sense of self with a larger archetypal identity. Rather than taking criticism as an opportunity for reflection or growth, they interpret it as a personal attack on something sacred. To such a person, Disagreement is not just disagreement. It is heresy. It is betrayal. It is a disruption of the cosmic order they believe they are upholding. They may label those who question them as enemies of truth, agents of darkness, or lost souls who cannot recognize the light they carry. This perspective doesn't leave room for dialogue, and it certainly doesn't leave room for self-doubt. Psychic inflation in this context becomes a kind of spiritual armor, a way of insulating the ego from vulnerability. It feels empowering because it places the individual in a narrative of heroic or divine purpose, but it also isolates, distorts, and ultimately corrupts. It replaces genuine spiritual development with performance. It substitutes the slow, painful work of inner growth with the seductive glow of external validation and self-deification. Jung and Naranjo both urge us to be vigilant, not only of others, but of ourselves. We must ask, do we seek truth or do we seek comfort? Are we following someone because they challenge us to grow or because they confirm what we want to believe? And most importantly, are we willing to question even those who claim to speak for the highest good? In the end, true spiritual maturity is marked not by certainty, but by humility, not by the absence of doubt, but by the courage to live with it. Those who walk the path of wisdom do not claim to have all the answers. They remain open, curious, and aware of their own limitations. And perhaps it is this very humility, so often mistaken for weakness, that protects us from the dangerous illusions of inflation. Jung warned us of a psychological state that poses not only a threat to others, but more dangerously to the person who experiences it. When the small, limited ego becomes identified with transpersonal content, forces much greater than itself, the psyche is subjected to unbearable pressure. This inflation, this swelling of self-importance or self-delusion, demands eventual compensation. The psyche cannot tolerate such imbalance forever. The more inflated the ego becomes, the more dramatic and painful the collapse will be when repressed or denied aspects of the self force their way to the surface. It is like living inside a bubble made of illusions, an identity so fragile, so false, that its bursting becomes not just inevitable, but catastrophic. At the heart of this condition lies the total identification with the persona, the social mask, the carefully constructed image presented to the world. Imagine someone who becomes not just adept at playing a role, but completely absorbed by it, someone who has become the mask. What could be more unsettling than encountering a person who, at every moment, in every interaction, mirrors back exactly what you expect? No surprises, no contradictions, no human flaws, just a flawless surface. Jung observed something profoundly disturbing in certain individuals, people whose social adaptation was so impeccably refined that it eradicated all rough edges, all inconsistencies, all spontaneity. They had become so perfectly social that they were no longer truly human. This mask, this persona, a term Jung borrowed from the ancient Greek theatre, becomes not just a tool for interaction, but a warning sign. It is a red flag that our instincts often notice long before our conscious mind can articulate the reason behind our discomfort. Why is this total identification with the persona so dangerous? Because it signals a complete dissociation between one's outer image and the true inner self. The person, in pursuit of social approval, has sacrificed their own authenticity. They have built such a convincing facade that even they have forgotten what lies beneath it. It's not just a performance anymore, it becomes their reality. The poet Fernando Pessoa expressed this danger with remarkable clarity. The danger is not in wearing a mask. The danger is in forgetting that you are wearing one. This insight, though poetic, resonates with ancient contemplative traditions. In Zen Buddhism, there is a concept of the original face that existed before birth, the pure, unconstructed self, free from societal layers. Taoist masters also warned of the risks of polishing the surface so obsessively that the substance beneath erodes. Jung, in his work, simply translated these timeless insights into the vocabulary of modern psychology. The warning signs are subtle but deeply felt. Have you ever interacted with someone whose behavior is technically perfect, always polite, always saying the right thing, always smiling in the right way, and yet something about them feels off? This person knows exactly how to act, which words to use, what expressions to show, and yet it all lacks the spontaneity and beautiful unpredictability that make us human. It's as though you're speaking not with a person, but with a performance. James Hollis, a Jungian analyst, remarked that such flawless social adaptation often hints at an equally vast emptiness within. Neuroscience supports this idea. Our brains contain what are called mirror neurons, a system that picks up on subtle inconsistencies between what a person says, how they look, and what their body communicates. These neurons give rise to that inexplicable feeling that something isn't quite right. It's not always logical. You might not be able to explain it, but you feel it. When someone's social mask becomes entirely disconnected from their internal truth, our nervous system perceives this incongruence, and it triggers discomfort, suspicion, sometimes even fear. The true danger, however, lies not in how this affects us, but in what it reveals about the person behind the mask. You see, when someone invests all of their psychic energy into maintaining a perfect image, into being seen a certain way, there's a cost. The parts of themselves that don't fit this image, shame, anger, insecurity, desire, doubt, don't vanish. They are not destroyed. Instead, they retreat into the unconscious, and there, they grow, they gain strength, they become what Jung called the shadow, a collection of everything a person rejects, disowns, or tries to hide. And the more rigid and artificial the persona becomes, the more explosive the shadow will be when it finally emerges, because it will emerge. It's not a question of if, but when. And when it does, it doesn't come politely knocking. It breaks through, often through crisis, through breakdown, through acts that seem irrational or destructive. The person who once seemed perfectly composed might suddenly act in ways that are shocking, unpredictable, even dangerous. And the irony is that this eruption is not a departure from who they are. It's a return. It's what was always there, waiting in the dark. This is why Jung emphasized the importance of inner integration, of not clinging too tightly to the persona, of not confusing our public identity with our true self. Because authenticity doesn't mean being flawless, it means being whole. To be human is to be complex, contradictory, imperfect, and evolving. The more we deny this, the more we risk becoming hollow, inhabiting a beautiful mask that hides an inner vacuum. And so, the lesson here is not to discard the persona entirely. After all, we need it. It helps us function in society, but we must remain conscious that it is just one part of us, not the whole. We must remember that behind every smile, every performance, every carefully curated image, there must be a living soul, a self that breathes, a heart that feels, a mind that questions, a being that dares to be real. And only when we reclaim that truth, when we allow the mask to be a tool and not a prison, can we begin the journey toward true psychological freedom. Marie-Louise von Franz, a close collaborator of Carl Gustav Jung and one of the foremost interpreters of his psychological theories, once made a compelling observation. Those who appear to be perfectly adapted to society, who seem to effortlessly conform to social norms and expectations, often harbor within themselves a shadow that is tightly repressed, compressed like a spring under immense tension. At first glance, these individuals may seem ideal, calm, polite, composed, successful, admirable even. Yet according to von Franz, this apparent perfection masks a dangerous instability. Sooner or later, the repressed aspects of the personality, the shadow, burst forth in unpredictable and often destructive ways. These eruptions are not minor emotional outbursts, but deep psychological disturbances that seem to emerge out of nowhere, taking everyone, including the person themselves, by surprise. This psychological dynamic helps us understand why those who appear to be the most flawless, the most morally upright, or the most socially integrated can sometimes engage in acts of shocking violence, betrayal, or breakdown. Their flawless surface is maintained at the cost of disowning the darker, more instinctual parts of their psyche. But the psyche, Jung insisted, is not something one can trick or silence forever. What is denied internally will find its way to the surface, often through compulsive behavior, dreams, projections, or sudden transformations in character. Jung emphasized that the complete identification with the social mask, the persona, is a profound betrayal of the deeper self, the true center of psychological wholeness. To Jung, the self is not the ego or the roles we play, but the totality of the conscious and unconscious psyche, the full expression of who we are meant to become. When someone becomes overly attached to their persona, prioritizing how they are perceived by society over the inner truth of their being, they essentially abandon their authentic individuality. This abandonment, Jung believed, always comes with a psychological cost. The person may achieve social success, but they pay for it with inner emptiness, disorientation, or worse, fragmentation. In extreme cases, this inner rupture leads to what Jung called archetypal possession, a disturbing psychological phenomenon in which a person becomes overtaken by a force from the collective unconscious. Imagine you're talking to someone, and mid-conversation, you begin to sense something has shifted, something subtle, yet deeply unsettling. They look the same. Their voice may still sound familiar, but there's a strange intensity in their eyes, an unusual stillness or certainty in their demeanor, as though another presence, something ancient, powerful, and impersonal, has started to speak through them. It feels as if the person you knew is no longer entirely there, and something else, something not quite human, is now animating their body. This deeply uncanny experience, recognized across cultures throughout history, is what many traditional societies would describe as spirit possession. In Jungian terms, it is better understood as archetypal possession, a state in which an archetype, a primordial pattern of the collective human psyche, overwhelms the individual's conscious identity. Archetypes are not mere symbols. They are powerful psychic structures that contain both luminous and shadowy aspects. When they are integrated consciously, they can enrich life with meaning and depth. But when they take over, bypassing ego awareness, the individual becomes a mere vessel, a puppet for forces far beyond their personal understanding or control. Jung was not alone in this understanding. Anthropologists like Mircea Eliade, who studied shamanic traditions around the world, documented that shamans could distinguish between controlled states of spiritual channeling, where the practitioner maintained a degree of conscious participation and uncontrolled states of possession, in which the ego was fully displaced by a transpersonal force. The danger in these latter states was precisely the loss of self, the total submission to a pattern of consciousness that had its own will, its own agenda, and no concern for the well-being of the individual vessel. In Christian mysticism, a similar principle is found in the practice of discernment of spirits, the careful evaluation of inner and outer forces to distinguish between divine inspiration and deceptive, destructive influences. The wise mystic, like the experienced shaman, or the trained analyst, learns to detect the subtle signals that indicate whether a psychological state is expanding the soul or consuming it. One of the key warning signs is the loss of psychological flexibility, when a person becomes rigidly identified with a single role, a single identity, a single archetypal narrative. This identification can take many forms. Someone may begin to act as if they are the unquestionable savior of others, determined to rescue everyone, regardless of consequences. Others may become the relentless warrior, obsessed with a fight or cause to the exclusion of all else. Some may fall into the archetype of the eternal victim, constantly persecuted and seeking sympathy, or the unshakable judge who sees the world only in black and white and delivers verdicts with no room for nuance or compassion. The specific archetype is not as important as the total identification with it. Once the person fuses their identity with this archetypal role, they lose the capacity for introspection, for humor, for humility. Their voice takes on a monotonous certainty. Their eyes seem to shine with an eerie light, and most disturbingly, you sense that the person is no longer fully present, something else has taken over. As Jungian analyst Robert Moore noted, in such moments, you are no longer interacting with a whole human being. You are encountering a fragment, an autonomous complex or archetype that has seized control of the individual's psyche. Modern neuropsychology has begun to uncover the biological correlates of these altered states. In certain moments of trance, religious ecstasy, or psychosis, the brain's default mode network, which is associated with the sense of self, shows reduced activity, while regions involved in mystical and transpersonal experiences light up with intensity. These states can be profoundly meaningful when approached within a structured ritual or therapeutic setting, but when they occur spontaneously, without context or containment, they can lead to psychological disintegration, delusion, or even violence. What makes archetypal possession so particularly dangerous is that it comes with a powerful sense of clarity and purpose. Ordinary consciousness is full of doubt, ambiguity, and contradictions, but when someone is under the influence of an archetype, those doubts vanish. They speak and act with absolute conviction. They feel guided by a higher purpose. This certainty can be dangerously persuasive, drawing others into their narrative and amplifying the influence of the archetype even further. To the untrained eye, it may seem like this person has finally found themselves, discovered their mission, or become fully awakened. But to those who can see more deeply, what's actually happening is a profound loss of individuality, a merging with a collective pattern that overwhelms the personal soul. In the end, Jung's work invites us to strive not for perfection or rigid clarity, but for wholeness, a state in which we integrate both light and shadow, both persona and self, both the conscious ego and the vast realm of the unconscious. To do this, we must remain humble, attentive, and committed to the ongoing process of self-discovery. And we must remember that true psychological strength is not found in certainty, but in the courage to face and integrate the unknown. Carl Jung observed with deep concern how political and religious leaders, under the grip of what he described as archetypal possession, could mobilize and manipulate mass movements not through logic or reason, but through a kind of overpowering certainty, one that felt beyond the human. These individuals spoke and acted as though their convictions came not from within themselves, but from a divine or absolute authority. And that was the essence of the danger. When someone becomes identified with an archetype, those ancient universal patterns embedded deep within the collective unconscious, they begin to act not as individuals, but as vessels for something far older, far more powerful, and far less human. If this message has stirred something in you, even just a little spark, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Because awareness, pure, honest awareness, is always the first step toward meaningful transformation. And don't keep this reflection to yourself. There may be someone in your life right now who needs to hear this. Someone who's struggling under the weight of unconscious patterns in their relationships. Send this message their way. Sometimes the right words at the right time can open a door that's been locked for years. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future explorations into the vast and beautiful landscape of the human psyche, from the depths of Jungian psychology to the timeless truths of the world's great wisdom traditions. The journey of integration is not an easy one, but it is the most important path we will ever walk, and you're not alone on it. We walk together. Have you ever felt that unsettling sensation when you meet someone new? That inner voice whispering that something doesn't add up, even when the person looks perfectly charming on the surface. It's as if your instinct detects a carefully crafted mask, but a mask nonetheless. The ancients once called this the eye of the soul, the natural ability to see beyond appearances and sense what lies hidden. Yet modern society has tamed us, teaching us to ignore these primal signals, to trust blindly in fabricated smiles and sweet words. But Carl Jung discovered a way to strip away those masks and reveal the truth behind false people. This knowledge is not just philosophical. It can protect you from betrayal, manipulation, and toxic relationships. Because the one who cannot recognize falsehood in others will never be able to recognize truth within themselves. Most people assume that detecting falseness is simply a matter of spotting contradictions. If someone lies about something small, surely they will lie about something big. If they avoid eye contact, then they must be hiding something. If they are overly nice, they must be fake. How naive we are, like sheep searching for wolves with obvious fangs, while the true predators have learned to smile. Modern culture has sold us the illusion that deception is obvious, that manipulators are clumsy, that toxic people carry signs announcing who they are. We've been taught to rely on shallow signals, on first impressions, on the popular pseudoscience that claims body language never lies. But let me tell you something Jung uncovered after decades of studying the human psyche. The masters of falsehood are not those who lie poorly, but those who have perfected the art of being genuinely false. They don't just pretend to be good, they truly believe in their own goodness while stabbing you in the back. This is the first great mistake, looking for lies that are easy to see. The truly dangerous individuals don't need to lie, because they've built an alternate reality in which they themselves are always the hero. When a narcissist betrays you, they don't feel guilty, they feel justified. When a psychopath manipulates you, they don't experience remorse, They feel satisfaction at their own cleverness. And here comes the second mistake, even more dangerous. We believe that our intuition is infallible. Something tells me not to trust this person, we think, and we congratulate ourselves for being perceptive. But intuition without knowledge is like a blind man holding a lantern. He may have the right tool, but he doesn't know how to use it. How many times have you distrusted someone simply because you didn't like them? How many times have you confused your own insecurity with intuitive wisdom? The uncomfortable truth is that we often reject authentic people because they reflect aspects of ourselves we refuse to face. Jung called this projection. We see in others the flaws we cannot accept within ourselves. The miser sees greed everywhere. The liar doubts every word he hears. The false person accuses everyone else of falseness. This leads us to the third and most devastating mistake. We believe we can judge people by isolated actions. He helped me once, so he must be good. She defended me, so she must be loyal. He has never failed me, so he must be trustworthy. But actions without context are nothing more than theater. The most sophisticated manipulators understand that trust is built through small, seemingly kind gestures. They invest in your confidence the way someone invests in stocks, waiting for the precise moment to cash in on their investment. Haven't you met people who are unbelievably helpful until they need something from you? Those friends who are always available to give advice, but vanish when you need someone to truly listen. The fourth mistake is believing falseness is static. We think people are either false or authentic, as if humanity were a light switch. But falseness is dynamic, situational, evolving. A person can be genuinely loving with their family and genuinely cruel with their employees. They can be generous when they feel secure and spiteful when they feel threatened. Falsehood is not a mask that can be removed, but a second skin that grows until it becomes indistinguishable from the first. And here is the most subtle error of all. We search for falseness in others to avoid confronting it within ourselves. To recognize a false person, we must first recognize our own falseness. And that, Jung warned, is something most people will never be willing to do. As the saying goes, tell me what you boast of, and I will tell you what you lack. Those who speak the loudest about spotting deception, who distrust everyone, who constantly accuse others, are often the ones hiding the most. That is why we keep failing. That is why we are betrayed by those we trust most. That is why wolves keep dressing in sheep's clothing, and why we keep falling for the same ancient trap. But Jung pointed to a different path, one that changes everything. His devastatingly simple truth was this: you cannot recognize falseness in others until you have recognized your own shadow. The shadow, as Jung described, is everything we are, but refuse to admit. It is the sum of our repressed qualities, the hidden parts of ourselves buried deep in the basement of the mind. Here lies the secret that can change your life. False people are not the real problem. Your unintegrated shadow is the real problem. Imagine, as Jung often did, that you live in a house with all the lights on, but you have never gone down into the basement. Down there in the darkness live all the parts of yourself you have rejected. Your capacity for cruelty, your tendency to manipulate, your hunger for power, your envy, your cowardice. As long as those parts remain in the dark, they act like an invisible magnet, pulling toward you the very people who embody the qualities you deny in yourself. Haven't you noticed how overly generous people often end up surrounded by exploiters? How those who boast of their honesty attract the most sophisticated liars, how those who pride themselves on emotional strength become magnets for the most skilled manipulators. This is not coincidence, it is the shadow at work. Jung called this inverse projection. We not only project our flaws onto others, we also attract those who can project theirs onto us. It is an unconscious dance, a psychic tango, where each partner finds in the other the traits they refuse to acknowledge within themselves. The one who denies their own capacity for cruelty becomes the perfect target for the cruel, because they won't recognize cruelty until it's too late. The one who represses ambition will be exploited by the ambitious because they cannot see coming what they have never accepted in themselves. This is the real diagnosis. False people do not deceive you because they are exceptionally skilled. They deceive you because you have blind spots in the exact places where you have repressed your own falseness. Jung discovered that every betrayal is in fact an encounter with your own shadow reflected in another. Every disappointment is a lesson about yourself you have refused to learn. Every wolf in sheep's clothing is nothing more than your inner wolf dressed up. Does this mean you are to blame for being betrayed? Not at all. It means something much more powerful, that you have the ability to stop being an easy victim. Jung's method is not about learning to read false people. It is about learning to read your own falseness. Because once you recognize and embrace your own shadow, it can no longer be used against you. Think of it this way. A con artist cannot trick another con artist with the tricks he already knows. A manipulator struggles to manipulate someone who understands manipulation from the inside. A liar cannot easily deceive someone who knows intimately the art of lying. This doesn't mean you should become false. Quite the opposite. It means you must recognize that you already carry that potential within you, that it is part of being human. And only by consciously integrating it can you neutralize its power over you. That is the path Jung illuminated. The way to stop being trapped by masks, not by tearing them from others, but by removing the one you wear yourself. Carl Jung expressed it in this way. What you deny enslaves you. What you accept transforms you. And what you integrate sets you free. The true ability to detect false people does not come from observing external behaviors, but from cultivating what Jung called shadow vision. The capacity to perceive in others precisely those traits that you have already learned to recognize in yourself. Only someone who has dared to explore the hidden depths of their own psyche can notice when others are acting from theirs. Only someone who has faced their own ability to betray can perceive betrayal before it happens. Only someone who has integrated their own falseness can see through the masks worn by others. Jung's real method is not to learn how to spot wolves, but to recognize the wolf that lives within you. For once you know your inner beast intimately, no other beast can ever take you by surprise. As the alchemists who fascinated Jung used to say, gold is always hidden in the mud. Protection against falseness does not come from artificial purity, but from consciously embracing and transforming one's own impurities. Here comes the part that most people do not want to hear. If you truly want to detect false people, you must begin by mapping out your own falsehood. This is not the work of the faint-hearted, but the task of heroes willing to descend into their own underworld. Jung developed a specific method for this, which he called dialogue with the shadow. It is not meditation, and it is not superficial self-help. It is a form of psychic archaeology, digging layer by layer into your deepest personality to uncover those aspects you have buried alive. The first step is ruthless observation. For an entire week, whenever you feel a strong emotional reaction towards someone else, especially a negative judgment, write it down. This person is selfish. That man is manipulative. That woman is false. Each judgment you make about others is a clue pointing directly to your own shadow. Jung used to say that everything which irritates us in others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. It is no coincidence that those specific qualities bother you and not others. Your unconscious is using irritation as a signal, showing you exactly which parts of yourself you have repressed. The second step is more brutal. Honest confession. For every negative trait you identify in others, you must ask yourself, in what situations do I also behave this way? No excuses, no rationalizations, just the simple recognition. Yes, I can be selfish when it suits me. Yes, I manipulate when fear takes hold. Yes, I pretend when I crave acceptance. This confession is not meant to humiliate you, but to liberate you, because only what is recognized can be integrated, and only what is integrated can be transcended. The third step is conscious experimentation with those traits you usually deny. This may sound dangerous, and it is if done recklessly, but when done consciously, it becomes a powerful tool of liberation. If you have repressed your ability to say no, begin practicing by refusing minor requests. If you have denied your tendency towards selfishness, practice putting yourself first in small, harmless situations. If you have rejected your ability to influence or manipulate, observe how you could sway others if you wish to. The key here is awareness. When you act from the shadow consciously, it loses its hidden power over you. When you deny it, it controls you from the dark. The fourth step is the most advanced. Developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposing forces within you without being torn apart by them. You are capable of generosity and of selfishness, of honesty and of manipulation, of love and of cruelty. This is not a confession of weakness, but an acknowledgement of your complete humanity, and paradoxically, only those who accept their potential for evil can consistently choose the good. Once these aspects have been integrated consciously, something extraordinary occurs. You develop shadow vision. You begin to see in others what you once projected or denied. When someone lies, you sense it immediately because you know intimately the vibration of lying. When someone manipulates, you detect it instantly because you have examined your own capacity to manipulate. But here lies the most important part. You no longer judge them, you understand them. And that understanding gives you immense power, the power to choose consciously how to relate. With authentic people, you can be completely open and vulnerable. With false people, you can establish clear boundaries without bitterness or resentment. You simply recognize the nature of each relationship and act accordingly. Jung discovered that this process, which he called individuation, not only protects you from toxic people, but also makes you more authentic. Because once you are no longer afraid of your own darkness, you no longer need to pretend to be perfect. That authenticity acts as a natural filter. Genuine people are drawn to you, sensing they can be real in your presence. False people withdraw because they cannot manipulate someone who sees through their masks. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are includes both your light and your shadow. Only when you embrace both do you stop being easy prey for those who live exclusively in darkness. When you complete this process of integration, you experience what Jung described as the birth of the authentic individual. You are no longer an unconscious victim of your own projections. You develop what the ancient alchemists called the eagle's eyes, the ability to see from above the true nature of human relationships. At first, you notice a new, unshakable serenity in the presence of falseness. When someone tries to manipulate you, you no longer feel anger or outrage. You feel a calm that almost borders on amusement, like a chess master who can see an amateur's move coming 5 steps ahead. You recognize the pattern because you know it from within, and that familiarity gives you an extraordinary strength, the ability to respond instead of reacting. Imagine the difference. Before, when someone lied to you, your wounded ego responded with emotional drama. Now, you simply notice the lie, the way one notices that it is raining. It is useful information that allows you to make wise decisions. There is no emotional weight, because there is no surprise. You know the game because you have learned its rules from the inside. This clarity transforms you into what Jung called the individuated individual, a person who has consciously integrated every part of their psyche. And here, something fascinating happens. Your very authenticity becomes a living lie detector. False people feel uncomfortable around you because their deception is exposed by contrast. It is like lighting a candle in a dark room. You do not need to point at the shadows. They reveal themselves. Your integrated presence makes other people's masks visible, not only to you, but often to themselves as well. You develop what Jung called psychic discrimination, the ability to instantly distinguish between authentic vulnerability and manipulative vulnerability, between genuine generosity and generosity with hidden agendas, between real love and conditional love. What once was confusing now becomes as clear as the difference between day and night. But perhaps the most powerful result of all is that you develop genuine compassion for false people. Not the codependent compassion that turns you into a victim, but the compassion of the wise, who understands. You realize their falseness is not pure malice, but unhealed wounds, shadow aspects, not yet integrated, parts of themselves they fear so much that they prefer to live in lies rather than face the truth. This understanding grants you a strategic advantage. You can interact with toxic people when necessary, in family, work, or social situations, without absorbing their poison. You know exactly what to expect from them and how to protect yourself without becoming paranoid or cynical. Your authenticity also attracts equally authentic people, for as the saying goes, like attracts like. Once you stop pretending to be perfect, you naturally draw those who have also made peace with their imperfect humanity. Your relationships grow deeper, more real, and more fulfilling. You experience what Jung called heroic individuality, the ability to remain true to yourself without needing external approval. You no longer have to choose between being loved or being authentic, because your authenticity itself becomes your greatest source of magnetism. In professional life, this clarity makes you a natural leader. People instinctively follow those who have integrated their personal power without being corrupted by it. You can influence without manipulation, inspire without demagoguery, lead without domination. And perhaps most extraordinary of all, you develop what Jung described as the prophetic function, the ability to see hidden potential, both in people and in situations. You can discern not only who is false now, but who may one day transform, and who is hopelessly trapped in their own lies. This wisdom allows you to invest your emotional energy wisely. You know when it is worth trying to help someone, and when it is better to draw firm boundaries. You know when a relationship can be healed, and when it is time to walk away with dignity. At the end of this journey, you will have achieved something very few humans ever reach: real freedom. Freedom from unconscious projections. Freedom from the desperate need for approval. Freedom from the fear of betrayal. Because once you know your own capacity for betrayal, you can no longer be betrayed by surprise. As Jung wrote in his memoirs, everything he became, he owed to the integration of his opposites. You too will have reached this alchemical synthesis, psychic gold forged in the fire of complete self-acceptance. The knowledge you have just received is not entertainment. It is a master key to psychic freedom, one that Jung spent decades forging. But remember this: a key that is never used rusts away, and knowledge that is not applied turns into sterile theory. If this video has resonated deep within you, if you have felt that unsettling recognition that always accompanies an authentic truth, then it means you are ready to continue this journey toward individuation. To step onto this path is not to simply collect ideas or words. It is to commit to the inner work that demands honesty, courage, and the willingness to face what you have long hidden from yourself. By joining this space, by staying close to the teachings we share here every week, you are not just watching content, you are stepping into a mirror that reflects the most mysterious and profound layers of the human psyche. We are not here to offer easy answers or the kind of shallow remedies that dissolve at the first sign of struggle. What we bring is closer to alchemy, to the gold that emerges only after fire has tested the raw material. Real transformation is not an instant trick, but a process that asks you to confront your illusions, to strip away the masks that the world convinces you to wear, and to rediscover the essence of who you are. In a society built on appearances, where identities are worn like costumes, the one who dares to meet their true face becomes sovereign over their own existence. That sovereignty is not about power over others, but mastery over oneself, the rarest and most precious crown a human being can hold. Each time you return here, each time you listen and reflect, you are giving yourself permission to break through the walls of forgetfulness that keep you chained to repetition. What we explore together is the hidden knowledge that dwells within the unconscious, the wisdom that speaks in symbols, in dreams, in the strange whispers of intuition that most people ignore. It is not easy to listen to that voice, because it demands that you abandon comfort and face the shadow you carry inside. But only those who dare to walk through darkness can find the light that belongs uniquely to them. Turn on the notifications, not just as a technical act, but as a symbolic gesture that says, I am ready to be reminded of my path. I am ready to receive the call when it comes. Share this knowledge with others, but not with everyone. Share it with those rare individuals who have the courage to look into their own depths, who will not run from what they see. Because truth cannot be forced on anyone. It can only be accepted by those whose soul is already prepared to hold it. The truth waits patiently for you. It does not chase, it does not beg, it simply stands at the threshold. And yet, no matter how much it longs to enter your life, only you can decide whether you are worthy of it. Worthiness does not mean perfection, nor does it mean being free of flaws. It means sincerity, the bravery to admit your fears and still take the next step. It means knowing that the journey will break you before it remakes you, and still choosing to walk it. The question is not whether the truth is ready for you. It has always been waiting. The question is whether you are ready for the truth.
Carl Jung left us an immense legacy filled with wisdom about the mysteries of the human mind. But there is something few people know. Everything we experience begins in our thoughts. What you think not only shapes how you perceive the world, it literally defines the quality of your life. However, most people live trapped in an internal dialogue they did not consciously choose, tangled in thought patterns that seem impossible to control. But what if I told you there's a secret behind all of this? A knowledge that, if applied, could change everything. Jung believed that our mind is divided between the conscious and the unconscious. The conscious part is where we believe we have control. The decisions we make, the opinions we express, what we rationalize. But in reality, most of our actions and thoughts are guided by the unconscious, a hidden engine that directs our lives without us even noticing. This means that many of the thoughts that torment you, those that seem to appear out of nowhere and make you doubt, fear, or even sabotage yourself, come from deep layers of your mind that you have yet to explore. The problem is that no one teaches us how to dialogue with our unconscious. We grow up thinking that if we ignore negative thoughts, they will disappear. But Jung warns us that what we repress does not vanish. It simply hides, accumulating strength until it eventually takes control of our lives in ways we do not understand. Those recurring thoughts, those emotions you cannot explain, are your unconscious trying to communicate something. Now, imagine that your mind is like a vast forest. The sunlight represents your consciousness, and the dark corners where no light ever reaches are your unconscious. Those corners are filled with shadows, but they are not your enemies. In fact, Jung tells us that facing our shadows is the key to regaining control over our lives, because those shadows are nothing more than parts of yourself that you have rejected, parts that need to be seen, heard, and integrated. Think about how many times you have found yourself trapped in a cycle of negative thoughts. Maybe you tell yourself that you are not good enough, that you will never succeed, or that there is always something holding you back. Have you ever wondered where those ideas come from? They are not absolute truths. They are the result of unconscious patterns you have accumulated throughout your life, influenced by your experiences, fears, and the expectations others have imposed on you. Jung invites us to challenge those thoughts, to pause and ask ourselves, is this really true, or is it just a belief I have accepted without questioning? When you start doing this, something magical happens. You realize that you do not have to be a slave to your thoughts. You can observe them without letting them control you. And most importantly, you can choose which ones deserve your attention and which do not. The problem is that we live in a society that has taught us to ignore our inner world. We are so focused on external noise, work, social media, the opinions of others, that we rarely take the time to look inward. But Jung believed that true change does not happen outside of us. It begins within. It's like a plant. You can't expect it to bloom if you don't take care of its roots. And those roots are your thoughts, your beliefs, and your connection to your unconscious. Let me share something powerful with you. Your thoughts are not the enemy. Even the negative ones serve a purpose. Jung taught us that every thought, every emotion, is like a messenger bringing valuable information about ourselves. But to receive that message, you must learn to listen without judgment. Instead of fighting your thoughts, observe them. Ask them what they are trying to tell you. And most importantly, remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the observer behind them, the one who has the power to decide what to do with them. When you start relating to your thoughts this way, a radical shift occurs. You no longer feel trapped in an endless loop of doubt and worry. Instead, you discover a clarity and inner peace you may have never experienced before. And from that place of calm, you can begin to create the life you truly desire. But how do you reach that state of mental clarity and control over your thoughts? Jung said that the first step is recognizing that not everything that passes through your mind truly belongs to you. Many of your thoughts are echoes of beliefs and fears you inherited from your parents, from society, or even from past experiences you never fully processed. They are not yours, but they have been with you for so long that you accept them as absolute truth. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you doubted yourself before trying something new? That voice that says, "What if you fail? What if you're not good enough?" is not yours. It is a reflection of all the times someone else doubted you or projected their own fears onto you. Jung described this as the power of the collective shadow, a buildup of unconscious patterns and energies that affect entire groups of people. But here's the good news. You can free yourself from that influence. How? By starting to pay attention to your thoughts without automatically reacting to them. When you hear that negative voice in your mind, instead of believing it, ask it questions. Why are you here? What are you trying to protect? Because behind every seemingly negative thought, there's a hidden intention. Maybe that voice that criticizes you is just trying to keep you safe, to stop you from taking risks so you don't get hurt. But the truth is that protection is no longer necessary. You are stronger than you think. And now, you have the power to choose a different path. Jung deeply believed in the concept of individuation, which is nothing more than the process of becoming who you truly are, not the person others expect you to be, nor the one you try to fit in, but your authentic self, the one that is in tune with your values, your dreams, and your purpose. To achieve this, you need to face your shadows, those parts of yourself you've been ignoring because you believe they were bad or unacceptable. Let me give you an example. Think of an aspect of yourself that you've always tried to hide. Maybe it's a fear, an insecurity, or even a dream you consider unattainable. Now, imagine that instead of rejecting that part of yourself, you choose to embrace it. Jung taught us that when we integrate our shadows, we reclaim an immense amount of energy. It's like unblocking a river that has been obstructed for years. That energy, once repressed, is now available for you to use on what truly matters. But here's something important you need to understand. This process doesn't happen overnight. It is continuous work, a commitment to yourself to be honest and brave. There will be days when you feel frustrated, when your old thought patterns try to return. But every time you choose to confront them instead of running away, you take a step toward your freedom. Controlling your thoughts isn't about eliminating them or avoiding negative ones. It's about creating a relationship with them, understanding that they are tools you can use to your advantage. Jung said that our unconscious mind has its own language, and that language consists of symbols, dreams, and emotions. So instead of fighting against your mind, learn to decode its messages. What is your anxiety trying to tell you? What does that recurring dream mean? What emotion is hiding behind that feeling of dissatisfaction? When you start exploring these questions, something incredible happens. Your mind stops feeling like a battlefield and becomes an ally. You are no longer at war with your thoughts. Instead, you work with them to build the life you desire. And that, according to Jung, is the true power of the human being. The ability to transform their inner experience to create an external reality more aligned with their essence. Now, imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you had that control. If, instead of feeling dragged by an avalanche of thoughts, you could observe them, understand them, and consciously choose how to respond. This is not some distant dream. It's something Jung believed we are all capable of achieving if we do the necessary work. One of Jung's deepest concepts is the idea of projection. Have you ever noticed that the things that bother you the most about others are often reflections of something within you that you don't want to see? Maybe you criticize someone for being arrogant, but deep down, that arrogance is an aspect of yourself that you've repressed. Or perhaps you feel jealous of someone because they represent a dream you left behind. Jung said that our relationships are mirrors, and what we project onto others gives us clues about the parts of ourselves we have yet to integrate. This is key to controlling your thoughts. Because if you understand that much of what you experience as external problems are actually reflections of your inner world, you can begin to shift your perspective. The next time something or someone triggers an intense reaction in you, pause and ask yourself, what is this showing me about myself? That simple question can completely transform the way you see the world, and more importantly, the way you manage your thoughts. Another powerful tool Jung left us is the importance of rituals and introspection. In our modern lives, we have lost connection with these sacred moments of pause and reflection. But a ritual doesn't have to be complicated or religious. It can be as simple as setting aside a few minutes each day to journal, meditate, or just sit in silence and observe your thoughts without judgment. This space for connecting with yourself is essential for beginning to decode the messages of your unconscious mind. And here comes something that may sound revolutionary. Your thoughts don't need to be perfect for you to have peace. Jung taught us that perfection is not the goal. Integration is. That means learning to accept both the light and the darkness within you. Because only when you fully accept yourself can you stop fighting against your own mind and start living with true authenticity. This brings us to a crucial point: authenticity. Living authentically doesn't mean you are always happy or that everything in your life is perfect. It means you are aligned with yourself, that you don't need to wear masks or pretend to be someone you're not in order to feel valuable. Jung believed that one of the main causes of human suffering is this disconnection between who we truly are and who we think we should be, and that disconnection starts in your thoughts. Have you ever stopped to listen to the narrative running through your mind all day? Maybe you tell yourself things like, "I should have done this better," "I'm not enough," or "I'll never make it." These kinds of thoughts not only drain you, but also create an internal reality that affects everything you do. But here's the secret. You don't have to accept that narrative. You can change it. And by doing so, you can transform your life. This doesn't mean simply repeating positive affirmations and expecting everything to magically improve. Jung taught us that real change comes from deep work, from facing your shadows and transforming the beliefs that no longer serve you. Because when you change your internal narrative, your perception of the world also shifts. What once seemed impossible now becomes an opportunity, and the right people and experiences start appearing in your life as if by magic. That magic we're talking about, that synchronicity that seems to connect everything in your life when you are aligned with yourself, is no accident. Carl Jung described this phenomenon as synchronicity, a principle that explains how seemingly unrelated events can be deeply connected by an internal meaning. When you begin working on your mind, when you face your shadows and consciously choose your thoughts, something changes in your energy. It is as if the universe responds to that internal transformation by aligning external circumstances in your favor. But how can you cultivate that alignment? It all starts with something very simple, yet often overlooked: self-observation. Jung told us that the first step to controlling your mind is to observe it without judgment. Think of your thoughts as clouds in the sky. Some are dark and storm-laden, while others are light and bright. But none of them are permanent. Learning to observe your thoughts without automatically reacting allows you to discover something powerful. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer behind them. This simple act of observation, of creating a space between you and your mind, can completely transform how you relate to your thoughts. When you realize that you don't have to be a slave to them, you begin to reclaim your power. That critical voice that sometimes keeps you up at night loses its strength when you stop feeding it with your attention. Jung would say that, at that moment, you are taking a step toward individuation, toward becoming the person you are meant to be. But this path is not always easy. There will be moments when your negative thoughts seem stronger than ever, as if they are trying to keep you trapped in old patterns. In those moments, remember this: you are not fighting against your thoughts. You are learning to understand them. Every time a negative thought arises, instead of rejecting it, see it as an opportunity to learn something about yourself. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? What part of me is seeking to be heard? Jung taught us that our negative thoughts are like alarm signals. They are not there to sabotage you, but to show you where you need to heal, where you have lost connection with yourself. By facing them, listening to them, and working with them, you begin to dismantle their power. Little by little, you discover that what once seemed like a weakness or an obstacle is actually a doorway to your transformation. Think of it this way. Every time you choose to face your thoughts instead of running from them, you are building your inner strength. You are proving that you have the courage to look within. to explore the deepest and sometimes most uncomfortable parts of your mind. This strength not only transforms your relationship with yourself, but also with the world around you. This brings us to another fundamental point that Jung emphasized: the importance of living with purpose. When your thoughts align with your purpose, everything in your life begins to flow. But finding that purpose requires disconnecting from external noise and connecting with your intuition, that inner voice that always knows what is best for you in a world full of distractions. Learning to listen to that voice can be one of the greatest challenges, but it is also one of the most powerful acts you can do for yourself. It is not about having all the answers immediately. Sometimes, purpose does not reveal itself in a moment of clarity, but in the small steps you take every day toward what truly makes you feel alive. Jung taught us that life is not a destination, but a continuous journey of self-discovery, and your thoughts are an essential part of that journey. When you begin to align your thoughts with your essence, with who you truly are, you not only change your life, but also inspire those around you. Jung believed that when a person works on their own transformation, they create a profound impact on the world. Your thoughts are energy, and that energy does not just affect your reality, but also that of those you interact with. Every step you take toward your authenticity is an invitation for others to do the same. Think about what could happen if each of us decided to take control of our minds, face our shadows, and live authentically. We would witness a collective shift, a wave of transformation that begins deep within us and extends outward, reaching every corner of our lives and communities. But this change starts with you, not with someone else, not with something external, but with you. In this moment, choose to observe your thoughts, integrate your shadows, and embrace the power that has always been within you. Because when you transform, the world around you does too. The journey of transformation is not always easy, but it is the most rewarding path you will ever walk. Every thought you align with your true self, every fear you overcome, and every step you take toward authenticity brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. Growth is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about deciding here and now that you will no longer live on autopilot, that you will take full control of your mind, your beliefs, and your destiny. Too often we let fear, doubt, and external opinions dictate the course of our lives. We silence our inner voice, ignoring that deep wisdom that has always been there, patiently waiting for us to listen. But the truth is, you are more powerful than you have ever imagined. The thoughts you hold, the beliefs you cultivate, and the energy you radiate shape your reality every single day. The way you see yourself determines the life you create. And the moment you decide to shift your mindset, everything around you begins to shift as well. Jung taught us that true transformation happens when we integrate the parts of ourselves we once rejected. When we stop running from our shadows and instead embrace them, we unlock an unstoppable force within us. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you lived in complete alignment with your highest self. No more self-doubt, no more limiting beliefs, just pure, unshakable confidence in who you are and the path you are walking. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that you are stepping into your full potential, that you are creating the life you truly desire. That is what awaits you when you commit to this journey. And this journey is not just about you. It's about the collective shift we can create together. Imagine a world where more people woke up to their true power, where we all chose to break free from mental conditioning, to face our fears, and to step into the greatness we were born for. The world changes when we change. The more people awaken, the greater the ripple effect we create. So, if this message resonated with you, if you feel the call to step into your highest potential, don't keep this journey to yourself. Help spread this energy. Subscribe to the channel and be part of this movement of transformation. Hit the like button if you're ready to take control of your thoughts and manifest the reality you deserve. And most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. Because you never know, your action today could be the spark that ignites someone else's transformation. Your journey starts now. The question is, will you take the first step? The choice is yours. See you soon. Don't miss our upcoming videos. We have so much more to share with you. And if you enjoyed this one, I invite you to check out our other videos for more insights, inspiration, and powerful lessons. Your journey is just beginning,